The world has always seen her as the golden girl of Hollywood, a radiant star whose laughter lit up screens, whose charm seemed effortless. But behind the glittering smile, behind the flashing cameras, a storm was quietly gathering, one that no one could have predicted. Friends whisper of nights filled with tears she tried to hide, of panic that gripped her chest in the dead of night, of the relentless pressures of fame that slowly, invisibly, began to erode her spirit. For decades, Heather's name was synonymous with success, dynasty, Melrose Place, and the countless roles that defined an era. But beneath it all lay secrets she never spoke of, regrets that haunted her in quiet moments, and a sense of isolation only the brightest stars ever truly know. Even those closest to her were often left in the dark. Family members remember the fleeting glimpses of pain behind her eyes, the phone calls that ended abruptly, the refusal to burden anyone with the weight she carried. Hollywood, a place of dreams and glimmer, can also be a prison, and for Heather, that dichotomy became a relentless cage. Industry friends, from the legendary co-stars she adored to directors who watched her brilliance on set, all sensed there was something she was protecting, a truth too fragile to share. They speak now reluctantly about nights when Heather would confide in them about the exhaustion of maintaining a facade, about the crippling fear of disappointing those who adored her. There were also the battles with illness, both physical and emotional, that were never fully revealed to the public. Panic attacks that left her trembling, depression that crept in quietly during moments of solitude, and episodes that led to hospital visits kept under wraps by a team desperate to preserve her image. Friends recall her confiding in them about the shame she felt, how the very thing that made her a household name, her talent, her fame, also became a source of crushing pressure. Even iconic Hollywood figures, the ones who shared stages and premieres with her, began noticing changes. A withdrawn smile here, a distant stare there, and a vulnerability that was impossible to ignore. It was more than just career stress. The heartbreaks, the public scrutiny, and the sense of being trapped under the relentless microscope of fame took a toll on Heather in ways few could comprehend. Her relationships, once bright and promising, were often marred by tension and misunderstanding, leading to moments of despair and self-doubt. Yet she remained the consummate professional, delivering performances that belied the turmoil she endured, hiding the cracks beneath her shimmering exterior. Even as the media speculated endlessly about her private life, Heather fought a silent war, a war that touched her family deeply, leaving them struggling to support her without fully understanding the battles she faced. The tragic reality is that Heather Locklear, adored by millions, has lived a life of public admiration intertwined with private suffering. The accolades, the fame, and the applause were constant, yet they never filled the void, never healed the invisible wounds. Friends remember whispered confessions, tears that were quickly wiped away, and the desperate search for solace in a world that never truly slowed down to listen. Hollywood legends, from Joan Collins to other contemporaries, watched from afar, offering guidance where they could, but even their influence could not protect her from the relentless spiral of emotional and physical strain. And now, as whispers of another devastating chapter in Heather's life circulate, one that no one saw coming, the gravity of it all weighs heavier. The fans who once cheered her name, the colleagues who admired her poise, and the family who loved her unconditionally, all face the uncomfortable truth. Heather Locklear's life, like so many in Hollywood, is a tapestry of brilliance and heartbreak, of secrets and sorrow, and the full story, only now beginning to emerge, is far more complex than anyone could have imagined. Beloved Heather. In the quiet moments, away from cameras and red carpets, she often found herself confronting the shadows of her past. Childhood memories, once distant and soft, now pressed in with a weight that few could see. Friends from those early years describe a girl who was bright, vivacious, and endlessly hopeful, but already marked by small, subtle traumas that would later echo through her life. The pressures of Hollywood amplified these scars, twisting hope into anxiety, joy into fear. Every audition, every press event, every smile captured on film was a performance layered over deeper turmoil she rarely spoke about. Family members recall nights when Heather would pace her home, talking to herself, whispering fears that no one could answer. The sense of impending doom, the terror of making a misstep in a career that felt like walking a tightrope, haunted her relentlessly. Even her parents, who adored her and had supported her every step, were left feeling powerless. There were times when they received frantic calls from their daughter, calling in the middle of the night, her voice trembling with panic, her words fragmented with worry that she would lose control of her career, of her life, of herself. And then there were the relationships, so public yet so fraught with private agony. Lovers came and went, some drawn to the glow of her fame, others genuinely seeking to help, but most unprepared for the storms that raged beneath her polished exterior. Each heartbreak added layers of doubt and regret, each betrayal deepened the isolation she already felt. Friends speak of moments when Heather would retreat entirely, locking herself away from those who cared, as if hiding could somehow contain the pain. Even her closest confidants would later describe a sense of helplessness, watching someone so brilliant struggle under invisible chains that no one could break. Illness, too, played its cruel role. Heather's battles with mental health were largely hidden from the public, a secret kept in hushed tones between family and select friends. Hospital visits, therapy sessions, and nights spent in near-total despair became her reality, while the world continued to see only the luminous actress who charmed every scene she entered. The irony was heartbreaking. The very fame that elevated her also shackled her, making it impossible to admit weakness without fear of judgment, ridicule, or misunderstanding. Colleagues who worked alongside her recall subtle signs, missed cues, moments of withdrawal, a tremor in her laughter that hinted at struggles far deeper than anyone could publicly acknowledge. And yet Heather's courage remained undeniable. Even on the darkest nights, she kept going, pushing herself onto sets, into scripts, into interviews, performing with a precision that belied the chaos inside. But beneath that determination lay regret, the haunting sense of things left unsaid, of opportunities missed, not because of lack of talent, but because life itself had imposed invisible barriers. Friends and insiders talk about her occasional confessions. "I'm not okay," she would whisper, sometimes to herself, sometimes to those she trusted. These words, fragile and fleeting, captured the reality Hollywood rarely sees, the human cost of perfection, the weight of expectation that can crush even the brightest of stars. Brightest of stars. Then came the series of events that no one anticipated, events that would send shockwaves through the industry and her family alike. Legal troubles, hospitalizations, and public speculation collided with private despair, creating a pressure cooker environment that only intensified Heather's struggle. Sources close to her described the fear in her eyes during these moments, the realization that even her carefully constructed persona could not shield her from tragedy. And through it all, the family endured alongside her, balancing love with anguish, always hoping, always waiting for a breakthrough that seemed increasingly elusive. The story of Heather Locklear is one of extraordinary brilliance intertwined with relentless vulnerability. It is a portrait of a woman whose life was defined by both triumph and tragedy, whose laughter masked tears, whose fame hid heartbreak, and whose courage persisted even when the world only saw the glamour. But the most devastating revelations were still to come, ones that would force Hollywood, her loved ones, and the public to confront the full weight of the life she had endured, and the private battles that no one had ever truly understood. Legendary Heather. The moments that followed were marked by a slow, heartbreaking unraveling, one that even the closest to her could barely comprehend. Those who had spent decades beside her on sets, actors like Jack Wagner and Doug Savant, noticed subtle but terrifying changes. Once confident, sparkling, and effortlessly charming, Heather began to appear fragile, her voice sometimes barely above a whisper, her once commanding presence now tinged with unease. Colleagues spoke quietly of late arrivals, of moments where she seemed lost in thought mid-scene, of a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. And yet, the cameras never stopped rolling, the world never paused, and Heather carried on, hiding a mounting storm that no one could predict would soon break. At home, the story was far darker. Friends recall chilling evenings when Heather would lock herself away, refusing food, refusing calls, refusing comfort, her mind spinning with fear and guilt. A sense of paranoia took hold, an internalized judgment that even those who loved her could not pierce. Her family, desperate to help, often found themselves shut out, navigating a maze of her anxieties, trying to reach a daughter and sister who seemed both present and unreachable at the same time. Even the simplest interactions became exercises in care and caution, every word measured, every approach carefully considered, because any misstep could trigger fear or anger. Medical crises soon became inevitable. Reports of hospital visits, once carefully obscured, began surfacing. It was a pattern that no one fully understood at first. Heather experiencing emotional collapse, panic attacks so severe that friends feared for her life, interventions that, while necessary, only amplified her sense of shame. Psychologists and therapists familiar with her case later described a mind overwhelmed by trauma, stress, and a relentless drive to maintain perfection, all colliding into episodes of severe distress. These moments were punctuated by desperate phone calls to family, by tearful confessions of regret, and by a profound sense of isolation that seemed impossible to escape. Impossible to escape. And then there were the secrets Heather carried, secrets so heavy they shaped the trajectory of her life. Rumors swirled, of strained friendships broken by miscommunication, of hidden injuries, of whispered confrontations behind closed doors with Hollywood executives. Friends now admit that Heather's legendary resilience often masked a fragile equilibrium, and that beneath the glittering awards and red carpet photos, she carried emotional wounds that time alone could not heal. Even iconic figures like Joan Collins reportedly tried to offer guidance, wisdom culled from decades in the industry, but sometimes the shadows inside Heather were simply too vast to confront alone. Financial strain, though less publicized, also gnawed at her. Legal battles, medical bills, and the expensive network of caretakers needed to support her recovery placed immense pressure on a woman already stretched to her limits. Family sources revealed that Heather often apologized to her loved ones for being a burden, a statement that cut deep because the burden was invisible to the world outside. Friends describe moments when Heather would hide tears behind sunglasses, when she would wander quietly in her home, muttering regrets to herself about choices she couldn't undo and the relentless pace of a career that demanded everything from her, yet gave little in return. Through all this, her public image remained intact, even radiant at times, but those who knew her intimately could sense the duality, the bright star on the stage of Hollywood and the woman behind closed doors, fighting battles with no audience, no applause, only the constant echo of her own fears. Every collapse, every hospital visit, every whispered confession painted a portrait of a life that was both mesmerizing and devastating, a life that Hollywood adored yet never truly understood. And as the whispers rose, yet another devastating chapter began to surface. The realization dawned that Heather Locklear's story was far from over, and that the world was only now glimpsing the depth of what she had endured and the fragility that fame could never protect. Respected Heather. What followed was a sequence of events that would shake even the most seasoned Hollywood observers. The media, once deferential, began circling, sensing a story too compelling to ignore. Rumors, half-truths, and sensational headlines painted her life as a cautionary tale, but few understood the complexity behind each claim. Her family felt the sting deeply. Every article a reminder that the world saw only fragments, only the crisis, never the resilience, never the quiet courage she summoned in moments of despair. Friends remember sitting with her late into the night, holding her hands as she whispered fears about being misunderstood, about being judged, about being abandoned in the very world she had illuminated for decades. The emotional toll was compounded by the constant scrutiny from those who had once cheered her rise. Hollywood insiders, agents, producers, even co-stars, began whispering about her fragility, misinterpreting vulnerability for weakness, and adding layers of pressure that she could scarcely withstand. Heather confided in a few trusted friends that this public judgment felt like betrayal, the very community she had helped shine now seeming to turn against her. Those who loved her, saw her wrestle with guilt. Guilt for the disruption her struggles caused, guilt for the attention her condition attracted, guilt for being human in a world that demanded perfection. Demanded perfection.